Nancy, this is 2420, and it's such a special and great occasion. So, what really the first question of those three questions we agreed to ask each other is, and I'm really wondering, what would you say looking back? Has your motivation changed,
Ooh.
like from now to comparing with 20 years ago? Incredibly enough.
No, I don't think it has actually. I think if anything, I've become more motivated. Um, possibly. I think when your knowledge deepens about a particular area, and in my case, that's around my real special interest is around children composing. The more you find out about that, the more you want to know, and also the more important it becomes, and especially in an environment, I think, where composing is a poor relative to performing and playing on an instrument. And so my kind of desire to make composing and young people as creators at the forefront of children's music education, if anything, that's got more. I think. I think there was possibly a time when there was a real collapse in public funding, and particularly BCMG experienced a real collapse in public funding. And I think that was a difficult time, because a lot of programs that I held quite dear were not able to happen, and having to come out of that sort of down period and rebuild was a difficult time. But I feel much more positive now. I think, with getting this very large grant from the Paul Hamlin Foundation, that real motivation comes back, because you see that work that you've been putting in being recognised, and somebody saying, right, now run with this, we want you to find out more. And I think that really helps with that whole motivation.
And now your first question, or should I continue? What would you like?
Well, I think maybe shall I go with one of mine?
Yeah.
So I've never really asked you this, but I was interested to know that when you were a child, a student, what was your first kind of interaction with contemporary music, and how did you get excited about contemporary music?
I think it sounds, it sounds like sounds you can't, you want to engage with. And then, of course, you hear the music tradition, and you see a piano and instruments being played, or you're in a choir, and then what happens then is a black box, actually, because of course there was no, I haven't been growing up in a contemporary music household or in contemporary music. I think probably in Lübeck, where I grew up, there was maybe one concert a year with contemporary music. Yeah. But what did not leave me out of its hold, out of its grip, is this question: all this very beautiful traditional music, and then all these fascinating sounds, which are like I don't know. It is really this pan tumbling down in the kitchen, like when you've put it up, and so and to combine these two worlds, this is what fascinated me, and what didn't really lose its hold. Yeah.
And I think that's what it really interesting what you say. I mean, I've worked with very young children a lot as well, and they have that fascination with sound, the pencil wobbling on the ground, or dropping a pebble into something, and somewhere, and that's so rarely noticed by the music educators or the educators around them or the parents. When a child does a drawing, it's people think, oh, wonderful, look at this drawing that the child's done, this is going to lead to something, and this is, they're starting to make. But that fascination with sound is often not noticed. And lots of what I've sort of tried to do, I guess, is try to keep that excitement and fascination with sound with the children we work with, and how do we help educators to notice that children are noticing sound?
Okay, my next question.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's an interesting question. Your job is not conceivable without music making. But what's the special excitement? Like, what's the particular excitement? Because of course, if you prepare for music making, then you practice your instrument, and you play as good as it gets, and you get congratulations, and you're going home to practice more. So, but what is your precise? Can you define what is your precise excitement?
Oh, I love that question. Really like that question. I have a particular fascination in how I plan workshops to get the best out of the young people that we work with, or to support our other workshop leaders and composers to do the same. And that's so much to do with, if you're looking at a piece of music, what is it about that piece of music that's going to really engage a young person? What's going to fire their imagination? And it's also that balance between a sort of poetic, more aesthetic stimulus and maybe a more musical inspiration, say a particular note set. And my delight comes when I feel like I've got the balance of those things really well, and when the child also feels a real sense of ownership of that material. The material might have come from elsewhere, but they take on an ownership and an excitement about that. And then, so, what are those adult interactions that happen with that child, between the child and the BCMG musicians? How do you get that real quality of interaction? So for me, the practicing of the violin is thinking about those sort of sometimes minute interactions that happen, and how can they be made better and better and better to allow the child to flourish. I think, does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah. And yes, and it has never stopped fascinating me. That is, it's been something.
Yeah.
I'm actually a trumpet player. I'm a trained trumpet player. That's what I studied. But I think maybe I've always felt that sort of the whole composing side of music, I didn't have that opportunity. And maybe in another parallel universe, I maybe should have been a composer, not a trumpet player. But I don't play the trumpet very much these days. I do get it out occasionally just to prove to the learning trainees that I do actually play it, and and how you use it in a workshop.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. Shall I ask you a question, Stephan? Let me think. I suppose maybe leading on from what we've been talking about, how do you think we can make contemporary classical music relevant to young people and their lives today?
On the risk of sounding selfish, I think I can't see a better reason for it's important for me. What I find fascinating, and what I can't hide, the traction it has. I simply share this. I think this is the strongest, and of course, then yeah, you have a focus of what you think is new and what you think is best. But then still, if it's not fascinating you, how would you pass it on then? And then, yeah, I just can hope that everybody and every young child, they make of it, they make something of their own of anyway. No?
Yeah.
And so this would be my own excuse there, really.
I think it relates to something we were talking about the other day in a different meeting about, amazing music played brilliantly will engage people, and in a way it's making sure we get that in front of young people, really, isn't it? And that they can feel a communication between the musicians who are playing and themselves. Because as soon as you have them in the same room and there's a dialogue about the music, it's wonderful.
It's wonderful and it's unquestionable. It's tangible and it's there, and you wouldn't. You can ask questions about it, but the fact that there's something that is so solid and manifest.
Do you remember the program we did where the young people took over our sort of front of house? They had I think it was the Birtwhistle concert, wasn't it? And I think I'd done a workshop around the piece with them in the school, and then they were doing our front of house, and they came to the family concert as well. And these children would have never encountered Birtwhistle, but they all went away thinking, really excited by the music that they'd heard. They may not have liked everything, but they were interested, and that is the start, I think, isn't it?
Talking 20 for 20, what would you dream of to happen?
What, from this point onwards?
Yes.
Well,
sorry for the stupid question.
One always wants more money to do things. I think the one thing that I would love us to do more of, and it's quite hard to raise funds for this, is commissioning music for young people as an audience. And by that I'm not talking about some kind of dumbed down, watered down idea of what contemporary music is, but really commissioning the very best composers to kind of just respond to children's nature, really. I think I mentioned it the other day, getting somebody like Shurya Sui to create a piece of music theatre for young people. And so, I think we've done quite well with getting, young people into composing, but them as audiences and commissioning what is the next young person's guide to the orchestra, but for contemporary music. I'd love to see us doing more concerts for young people with specially commissioned music in those concerts. I think that would be my dream, but it's very hard to raise funding for that, and it requires a lot of funding.
Thank you.
And actually, that's quite good, because that leads in perfectly into my last question for you, which is, if money was no obstacle, what would be your dream learning or mass participatory project for BCMG?
Most importantly, for me, what's lacking is certain kind of regularity. Like every month, a new piece. Why is that so difficult? And then you see, we are building huge projects and even huger project plans before the project then happens, and it is all special, and in a way, it should be more normal.
Yes.
And so and then I think engagement for young people, engagement for masses or audiences or so, or whatever, figures aside, it would just be more normal. And this is what I would deeply wish. And this is, of course, what you do with this out of school program, that there's a regularity and some kind of habituality. That's very difficult.
It is without a bigger sort of amount of core funding, really. Exactly, where every month there's a concert and there's all the associated projects around that, and so you have the consistency with the people. You really build up the audience and the participants, and they come really with you on that journey. Whereas it can it can be that you sort of go from one big project to the next big project, and there's a sort of delay in between, isn't there? And it's hard, it's really hard to keep that regularity and build the audiences and take them on a journey with you sometimes, isn't it? Yeah, no, I really appreciate what you're saying there.
So that would be my wish, that we have this simply. I think well, well, you are very successful in what we are doing, and so that it should. My wish would be that this something is really something, more regular.
Yes, and I think the other thing that we've both talked about is having a youth ensemble. So we've got Next now, but having a younger group that was regularly playing contemporary music with us and being supported by the players, that would be another dream for me as well.
Absolutely. Huge gap there, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially contemporary youth ensemble, yeah.
Yeah. Well, really interesting. Good questions.
Thank you, Nancy.
And thank you, Stephan, for joining us for this 20 for 20 campaign. And it's I think this will make this is the last contribution, I think, of in the month of October. So
let's see.
Yeah, be great.